Fed up with soldering wires with your model railway? These might just be the answer. Welcome back to Chadwick Model Railway. I'm Charlie. Wiring model railways has always been a bit of a challenge, and some of us are better at painting and weathering and laying track, and some of us are better at wiring. I think my wiring skills are quite adequate, really, and as sad as it might sound, I tend to enjoy it. But in the past, I've used things like these bits of chocolate block. I think this is a 5 amp strip, and I think this is a kind of a 1 amp strip. And what you can do with them is obviously you have your wire going in here and out the other side, and you just connect them all up. Or you can loop your cables. Let's say you had your red cable going into here and into here and into here, and you can loop from one to the other, and then it becomes something known as a bus bar. That means that all of these are the same power, and then you can draw off your feeds to your individual things, whether it be lighting circuits for line side houses, signal boxes, all that, or indeed track feeds if you're into DCC. So these are the two options that I've used in the past. Moving on from there, I then went into using tag strips. Now, tag strips are available from Squires, that's squirestools.com, for a staggering price of £2.99. And what you can do with these is, as you can see, there's 2 complete sets of contacts, and every contact here is independent. But if you were to solder one piece of wire all the way down the inside of the contacts, then you could then apply power on one and take it off on all the different contacts, and therefore you have a kind of a bus bar there. And similarly, you might do it one side for your black cables and one for your red. All makes sense. Here's one I made earlier, and as you can see, it's somewhat shorter because all I do is, instead of using a board that I don't need, where I don't need all the terminals, I just use a cutting disc, as you've probably seen in the past. Use a cutting disc, wear a face mask. If you cut these, it chucks up all kinds of sort of fumes and fibres, so you need a face mask for that. That's if you're not wearing it for the coronavirus. God help us. But yeah, seriously, so this is what I've done in the past. And if I can show you in close-up, hopefully you can see that there is a piece of wire soldered all the way down there. In comes your black feed, and then you can take off all your black cables, and similarly with the red. So there's another piece of wire soldered in there, and then off go all your red feeds. And it kind of makes perfect sense. But it's not the easiest way of doing things, because soldering, when this is screwed to the bottom of a baseboard, is not easy. If you've ever tried it, solder is a lot hotter than you really think. Then when you're upside down, in goes your solder iron, you pop in your solder, and it drips on your fingers, and it hurts like hell. There's no other way of putting it, really. If you've watched my videos in the past, you've probably seen me do it when the boards are on their back, as it were, because what I like to try to do is do as much wiring as I can before I put the boards in situ. But of course, things are bound to change in the end, because I will install signals and I don't really know where they're going to go at this stage. So it's okay doing the point motors and the droppers from the rails. But where you're going to put in things like lighting inside buildings, you're still going to have to go in there and try and install them from underneath the boards. So what have I found? So trying to find an alternative to severe solder burns, I went to an online site, and opening this packet, this one came in the post the other day, this is what you get. A pack of these terminal blocks. So what's in the packet? Well, there are 5 identical 12 terminal blocks, if that makes sense. And there are also, there should be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 red and black bridging contacts. So what's the price? Well, if you remember, I mentioned that the ones from Squires were £2.99. Well, for these 5, it's £10.99. I think that works out at £2.20 each, and they are quite incredible. Now hopefully you can see that the terminal face, this cover, is actually numbered 1 to 12. And if I just pull this off, then obviously the contacts are exposed. And as you'd expect, this contact is connected by a metal bar to this one, that one to that one, that one to that one, and so on, all the way down here. And if you loosen off the screws on one side, you can use one of these nifty little sort of bridging items to connect all one side of the contacts, like so. Then all you need to do is tighten all 12 of these up, and you're kind of good to go. I still can't get over the price, I must confess. I mean, you know, £10.99 delivered to you by the folks at Amazon in 2 days. And when I bought the first lot, the first thing I did, as soon as I realised their usefulness, I went and ordered that the second packet just so you could see what they were like. So there we are. Now obviously every one of these are connected via this bridging piece, and therefore every one of these is connected as well. So what else can we do with this now besides just take off the individual feeds? So what I've opted to do under my baseboards now is, just as I've showed you earlier about using it as a bus, all I simply do is connect one cable into one end, another cable into the other, so with my power coming through my bus cable, comes into here and then goes out to the rest of the layout, and now I can take off any track feeds or any other sort of wiring supply that I need, you know, whether it to be signals or whatever, and do it that way. And I write down what I've used each terminal for. So if you remember, this was numbered 1 to 12, so I would naturally write down that terminal 1 would be my loop in for my power feed, and terminal 12 would be my loop out, and then these would then go to my dropper wires on the track feed, or to whatever the components I need to put power to, whether it be lights, signals, point motors or whatever. But you can do this on the board upside down, and all is a bit fiddly. You know, occasionally if you undo the screws too much, they'll fall out. But to me, it just makes perfect sense. But what if you're not happy with just red and black? Well, that's quite simple, isn't it? You know, you just get if you're just going to use an earth block, you can put a piece of earth tape on there, or similarly, if you're using brown rather than red or black, you can just simply just cover it with brown tape. I mean, nothing really could be that much simpler. And just like that. So all you've got to do really is just plan ahead, think about what you need, and as I mentioned, you only get sort of 5 terminals in a pack, but to me these are brilliant. It then occurred to me that I might only want a few of these terminals, so could I kind of cut these in half and have half red and half black? So if I take a pair of snips, can I snip straight through this? Oh, blimey. Yes, it appears I can. So if I put them the other way, so that this end isn't kind of nowhere near the other side, and screw these back up. And then repeat the same on the blacks. And with this piece, we can pop that into there, and no doubt you can see that we have success if I just do the end ones up. And by using the cut ends towards the ends, as it were, to make sure that you can't get a short across here, and there we have an excellent little buzz bar again, with your reds and your blacks to feed out. I think this is a pretty good system, and it's certainly better than this fiasco when I did some wiring up of something called a PM42 on the old Chadwick. So there we go, £10.99. Can't really go wrong at that price, can you? And as usual, I'll leave a link in this description down below. Right, let's go and have a look at Chadwick. Well, to develop the new Chadwick Model Railway further, I have to go back under the old boards and start removing some of the components. And the DS64s, which change the points, and this BDL168 all have to be removed, and some of its wiring, but most of the wiring sadly will have no use on the new boards. Last week I showed you where I constructed this new board and also this one underneath, and the idea was that I would get under here and fit the Digitrax components to this board. Lots of folks mentioned that that wasn't such a good idea because of the limited area, and you'd be always kind of stooping in on your back, and they're totally right. So the other options is to have a sliding drawer, which I really don't like, and I have a couple of model railway buddies who've had problems with those, because as you drag them out, all the cables have to have enough slack to move them in and out, and there's always issues with breaking cables. So what are my alternatives? Well, there's this board just here, and it's just another scrap piece of 12mm plywood, but just pacing out the items at the far end, we've got something known as a PR3, which is an item which speaks to a computer. It has a USB input. Then we have the PM42, which is the power supply, which it breaks up the power supply into 4 different areas that go out into the layout. So that's 4 different districts that go out, and each of these relays has a safety side to it, in as much as if you get a short on one of these districts, the other 3 remain powered, so your whole layout doesn't die. And that power there will go out via some of these nice new shiny terminal blocks into the layout. These are DS64s, which change the points, and each one can change 4 points, or in pairs it can change up to 8 if 2 change at a time. And then here are more terminal blocks. This is a BDL 168, as is this one over here. Just I haven't got the terminal block on the end of it. And those are the items that sense where trains are for block detection. And they all these items, oh sorry, there's the SE8C, this switches signals, and all these components are linked up by a network known as LocoNet, and that allows every component to speak to every other component back to the command station, and then in turn, if you're into block detection, back to the computer. So what I actually thought we're doing was mounting all these items on this board, and then putting this board on the wall at the back, or on a flap to come down. Of course, making this a flap to come down causes problems for the cables flexing in their own way. So the other alternative, of course, is to take out this board, kind of scrap it and trim it, and then cover the whole of the back wall with this board, and that way the wiring issues would be far less intense. It would be so much easier, because I could then space the components out more, and I wouldn't be wasting this. I would obviously recycle the timber, but it's just a case of trimming it off, putting another small batten, and then fitting these components to this board, and then this board onto the wall, and then doing the wiring from there. It's just different ways of skinning a cat, really, I suppose, isn't it? Anyway, perhaps you'll let me know what you think. Well, that just about wraps this video up, and hopefully, if soldering isn't one of your best attributes, these terminal blocks might well come in handy for you too. So what is there left to say? Hopefully you've enjoyed it. There should be a Patreon link there, a subscribe there, and a video here and here. And whilst the coronavirus is around, try to stay safe. Thanks a lot. Take care. Bye bye.